Okay, everyone. I am going to keep today's lesson pretty short and sweet to the point. And then if you have any questions, you can ask. I know that I kind of gave you yesterday a rundown in Google Classroom of what to keep track of what to look for, trying to keep us organized as best I can. And then if you continue to have questions, if you have anything that you would like me to either answer or even discuss via live stream or possibly tomorrow or Thursday Zoom, what I'm looking at is email me screenshots. It gives me the opportunity to immediately have it prepared for you for the live version when we can get together and address it as a full class. Otherwise, if you have no questions or I'm getting no feedback, I am only going to assume that what we're doing is working and is working as well as can be expected. I know ideally I would so prefer to be standing in my classroom talking to you guys face to face instead of behind a computer, but that is where we're at, and please make sure that you continue to communicate with me one way or the other. While we're during the live streams, or even if we choose to Zoom, please know that I can go back and forth between my email as well as you can. And if you find something that you want to send to me, you can take a screenshot of it and just in the chat let me know that you've done so. And then I can flip over to my email and I can check to see what your question is, and at least we can address it as best as possible while we're still live. If not, you can always send them to me um, all day, anytime, and I will answer them as fast as I can, and or let you know that we will address it during the next live stream. So with that being said, I only have two things for us to talk about today, and then if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them. You can see that this kind of goes along with what we were talking about yesterday. And I know yesterday I said every time I get to this part of the lesson, I kind of go back and think of these guys. Again, I'll put them up there. And this is specifically, I'm sure that at some point in time you guys have pushed together or pulled back apart. You can even see up here, there's the version where it was pushed together in that guy. And I know it doesn't quite fit this idea of similar, but it is the idea that if a figure kind of increases in size, it's not going to just increase the outer shell a certain way and or decrease the outer shell, and every other part wouldn't increase or decrease at the same rate. And I also used the example of the Incredible Hulk. You guys know it as the Marvel version from the movies. Maybe you even remember the Edward Norton one prior to all of the Avengers and whatever movies now. But years ago, when I was a kid, the Incredible Hulk was played by a gentleman called Lou Ferrigno. And I can remember watching on TV just like you watched, much better now than then, but this idea of this person growing into the Hulk. Now, just recently in one of the Avenger movies, you saw him kind of fight moving back and forth into the Incredible Hulk, where part of him would stay Bruce Banner and the other part would increase to the Hulk. And, he was fighting with himself in, I don't know if it was, which one it was, Thor Ragnarok or something. But in any event, you don't see when something increases in size, part of it not. Or if something shrinks, you don't see the whole thing not shrink. So it's this idea that I always thought was interesting, that we specify segments in our similar triangles are going to have the same scale factor as the triangle itself. So if we're talking about our segments in our triangles, what this tells me is the scale factor holds. It's the same, no matter what. So when we're talking about our two triangles here, and I'm looking at this given statement where it specifically tells me what matches with what, please make sure that you pay attention that it does tell us AB is going to match with XW. So I know AB corresponds with WX. And even though I can see that BC would correspond with XY and AC would correspond with WY, I don't need to know all of that. I just need to know that my scale factor is going to be set by those two given sides that I have made sure using my similarity statement that I know what matches. So I use that ratio to set up my 14/10. Now, I could still use 14/10, but if I needed to know what my scale factor was, I know to reduce, and I know it's 7/5. So if I'm asked, I know that my scale factor is 7/5. Again, a little bit of a review. But all that tells me is whatever X is with 6 would have to eventually reduce to 7/5. The scale factor should be the same. So again, just because the segment's on the inside doesn't mean it's not part of this figure that's being reduced or increased depending upon which vantage point you're looking at. So I don't need to necessarily use the scale factor. What I do need though is to make sure that whatever 14/10 is, X to 6 is the same. So I could use my 7/5 or I could just keep it as 14/10. Eventually when we cross multiply to solve, it will work itself out. So I'm just going to deal with the smaller numbers. And again, I stayed consistent, big to small, big to small. And when I cross multiply, I do get 5x equals 42. When I divide, x is going to go into 42, or excuse me, 5 is going to go into 42 8 times with 2 left over. And I just found out that BD is 8 2/5. And if I plugged it back in and I checked, 8 2/5 to 6 should reduce to 7/5. Well, if I'm unsure of that, and I'm not sure if that works, I could take 7 divided by 5 and just check that it's 1.4. So if I do 8 ABC2, ABC5, and I always push enter so that I don't have to worry about parentheses, and divide it by 6, I get 1 2/5, which is the same as that 1.4 that we had before. So I could check it to make sure, but I do end up with 7/5 both times. So it seems like it's an of course situation, but it is something that is pointed out, and I know that if we saw questions that dealt with the segments inside our figure, it would cause us an issue, and we would wonder, well, what am I supposed to do? And that means any segment. So even if we did have a centroid show up in here, because in this problem specifically, BD and XZ, those are medians. And I know they're medians because I have these tick marks at the bottom. So if I forgot what a median was, they are segments from the vertex of our triangle to the opposite side's midpoint. So of course, even if I had a centroid show up in here, the scale factor is not going to change. Again, you don't increase or decrease a shape and not increase or decrease all of it at the same rate. So far, before I get to the second question, are there any questions from your end? If you do, continue to ask. You can chat over on the side again, but I'm going to scroll up here. I know you had E and C pages again that I had you look at. I did provide the answers. I know I have the no-re questions that you're going to want to make sure that you take a look at and that you complete. Again, those are required. Please do not be surprised when we start adding a couple other requirements. I'm trying to keep it spread apart. All right. So in this question, we have those two segments. And can you tell me what those two segments are in this problem? Thank you. Very good. They're altitudes, so they are segments um, in our triangle, so they're not going to be any different from the medians. And they're going to be treated the exact same way. Again, we're going to use our given statement to make sure that we know what matches with what. And again, if our given statement isn't there, we want to make sure that we do pay attention to the tick marks that are given to us in the pictures so that we know what corresponds with what. So again, our given statement's going to tell us as well as the tick marks. So one or both. All right, and I see, yep, it is. They are just altitudes. We don't have the tick marks at the bottom here to tell us that they've been bisected. So they are just altitudes. So when we go to solve for x, what we want to make sure is that, again, we match up what goes with the two numbers. So right away I can see that LM is going to match with PQ. And I could do the scale factor if I was asked. I don't have to, but in this case, let's not worry about what the scale factor is right now. Let's just solve the problem. So I do have that 14 to 8 should have the exact same ratio as the MO to QS. So it should hold the same ratio as that. So x plus 3 over x. And when I cross multiply, we do get 14x equals 8 times x plus 3. And when I distribute, we end up with 8x plus 24. When I subtract 8x, we end up with 6x equals 24. And we end up with x equals 4. Now again, I keep in mind what the scale factor should be so that when I do end up plugging it back in, it should match. So don't forget that if, again, I'm asked for our scale factor, which means what everything either increases or decreases to, our 14/8 does reduce to 7/4. So our scale factor should match. And when I plug this in, this ends up being 7/4. So MO is 7. SQ is 4. And we can see that they do match. So it does give us the opportunity to make sure that we do have the right answer. So I know we talk a lot about checking your work, and again in Algebra 2 next year you're going to be told a ton to check your work, but just make sure that when you do plug it back in, it matches. Now, that's all I have for you today. I am going to update you on Google Classroom, again, just to keep track of what we're doing. Do any of you that are there have any questions for me? And if not, just recognize that you can always email me the questions, a screenshot of them. You're not sure why I got the answer I got. Could I clarify? All right, guys. If not, have a great day. Check Google Classroom. And we are all done for today. Just wanted to make sure I clarified all that with you. Wish I could go back to bed, McKenna. Have a great one.